last time insisting on your role, manipulator, artist, all those things. But wouldn't you perhaps prefer a word like connector in a network rather than the suburb?
Well, I was a catalyst. I was definitely a catalyst. I was definitely a catalyst, okay. Acting as a conduit for artistic ideas of terrorism, you know, to be an art terrorist, to actually change life physically in the real world. You know, you were basically creating a special world inside the real world, and you were bound to come up with a lot of problems. Most artists close the doors and do it all inside the confines of their room. They don't have to do battle with the real world. If you're suddenly taking real people and you're actually out on the street, then you're actually right in the front line and the heart and the mouth of the lion. And it's a bigger job, and you've got to be a smart guy to survive. And I barely did. But I carried on. My mentor forced me to carry on that journey, and I'm still here.
In some texts, you are related to this movement called the Situationists.
Well, that was a part of that. They were mentors of mine during the course of art school in the 60s. The Situationists were major mentors because they were able, as failed artists, to use political rhetoric, probably sometimes the most inarticulate rhetoric, difficult to understand, but there were certain phrases and certain attitudes that really spoke very clearly about the commodification of the planet, about the whole spectacle of the commodity and society becoming part of it and everyone in it merely an unpaid slave to it. You know, we live on the most expensive theme park in the planet, and we're all just unpaid film extras in it. And I think the Situationists, everything they said, and they said that very clearly in the 60s, we didn't quite believe was happening because it hadn't quite happened. But the fact is, today, I think everything the Situationists said has absolutely come true.
I mean, Guy Debord, I have his book here, The Society of Spectacle, expressively says in his foreword that his more or less only aim he has with this book is to do harm to the spectacular society. So, am I right that you have similar aspirations in your art?
Yeah, he's one of my mentors. He's one of my mentors. When I helped put God Save the Queen at #1 and had it banned and not being able to be played on the radio at the same time, Guy Debord called me up on the telephone. I'd never spoken to him in his life, and he was, as you well know, a total recluse. He avoided any form of media involvement, but he called me on the phone and he said, "Thank you very much for getting my record to #1. I agree with him. It was his idea, yes.
You so fascinating with karaoke?
It's just a word I use, and I think it's a word that's becoming common currency for a world we live in today where most people live a life by proxy. You know, we live in a world in which it is very product driven. People don't like the messy process of creativity. That's what karaoke is about. Karaoke means mouthing the words of other people's and then not having to take any responsibility for it from the moment that performance ends. So it's a wonderful metaphor to describe the world we live in today, a kind of karaoke world. A world which is product driven, a world that's about the commodification of a planet, a world that's about where everyone in it and everything in it that we produce is for sale, meaning there are no longer ideologies. There are no longer people who could claim they are not for sale. So, in order to define this kind of new world we've entered, and it's not a world that suddenly happened, it's a world that's progressively happened, probably for the past 40 years or more. But we finally have arrived at a full-on commodification of the entire planet. And people have become less anarchic, less free-thinking. Everything appears in one way very stable, very normal. High culture and low culture have had their edges blurred. They've become one culture because everything has been turned into product. We live in a world of dilettantes, where dilettante was a word that was considered derogatory in a way if any artist was charged or accused, or even if someone who was working in more than one field was accused of being a dilettante. Today, to be a dilettante is de rigueur. It's very fashionable. Every contemporary artist, you could say today, is without question struggling to become a dilettante. You know, if it's Damien Hirst, he can be making a conceptual art piece today. Tomorrow, he can be opening a kebab house. The following day, he can be a TV comedian. I think that what's happening is this sense that you don't ever need any longer to be anything other than successful in the mediated world. So everybody is driven towards becoming part of the media. If you're not in the media, you are dead. You do not exist. So the art of celebrity and performance has become a kind of karaoke performance. No one's terribly sincere. It's all about faking it and making it and being part of what I think is a kind of karaoke style.
Just back to the relationship between Mr. Mclaren on the one hand and Sex Pistols on the other hand. You just described yourself in this relationship as a manipulator and all that. On the other hand, how would you describe Sex Pistols, the band, as your material? As
they were brilliant architects and aids to the noble pursuit, and they were innocent victims of it. And they were naturally going to be angry, as any innocent victim would be, of what they felt was arch manipulation. In the end, they felt a little duped. But that's only because they didn't have art lecturers like I had, so they never understood the full story, and they couldn't easily or always relate to it. It's perfectly understandable, you know. It's like, you know, well, they at the end of the day wanted to be rich and successful. They couldn't understand how I could keep them from just not doing that, but just almost trying constantly to fail. They got fed up with doing that, so they wanted to attack me. You know, this is not what we really entered this game for, Malcolm. You know, but on the other hand, I would always respond with, but you wouldn't be here doing it. You wouldn't even be loved, admired, and found inspiring if you didn't celebrate what I'm telling you. You would just be another one of those horrible pop cultural rock and roll bands that you've set out to destroy. You'd be an utter contradiction. You would be fate.